Hey guys, what's going on? It's your favorite NRL Fantasy Fanatic Spot, the Aussie here for round number 2 of NRL Fantasy. And guess what, guys? Super success in round 1 because we are ranked 22. Yeah, that's right, 22 of a possible 77,000 different fantasy coaches out there. And I can't even be more stoked. Choo! Choo! Let's have a look at the leaderboard after round 1. Mundine Forever is number 1 with 961 points. That is a A+ effort. To nearly hit that 1,000 point mark in round 1 is insane to the membrane. Let's have a close look down to where we are. In number 22, we're 926. So we're only 2 points off getting inside the top 20. And that's so close. That could be the difference between reserving one player over the other. Little things like that, guys, at the end of the day is going to be the difference between you getting up the front and getting down the end. And where do we want to be at the end of the day? We want to come first because there's no prizes for second. There might be a prize for second, I'm actually not too sure, but we want to make sure we get first. And my team's going to be an open book, so if you like the fact that, you know, you can view my team, I can assist you, you can possibly assist me with your questions by double questioning my team. And I do applaud you guys. There's been quite a few questions that have come my way since making my first video. It's been really successful. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hits. More than I thought, at least for round 1. So if you're liking this series, hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be doing videos every Wednesday. I love your questions. Be sure to keep popping them in. But there's been a lot of ups and downs. A lot of players didn't perform. A lot of players surprised us. So let's have a bit of a closer look at this week's lesson that I want to teach you guys for NRL Fantasy. And it's a really important lesson because rolling into round 1, a lot of people tend to make the number 1 mistake in fantasy, and that's trading out underperforming guns in the first round. And that's a question that I've actually received from one of you guys, and the question specifically asked around, is it wise to potentially trade an underperforming gun for a gun that proved themselves in round 1 for whatever reasons, for reasons X, Y, and Z? So for my team, all my players bar 3 gained money. So effectively, they hit more than what their break even was at least. The 2 players that were playing inside my 17 that didn't were James Graham and Sammy Burgess. And Dylan Python is the guy who wasn't outside my team, but obviously, you know, hurt himself with an ACL injury. A lot of bad luck. He looked outstanding in the first 20 to 30 minutes, kicking a 40-20 in one of his first touches. He looked pretty dangerous as well around the ruck. You know, that's the reality of fantasy life. You're going to have those ups and downs, but you're going to have to learn to kind of work around them and be, you know, versatile. The other thing, of course, was for all those fantasy coaches that had Jesse Bromwich, who ended up breaking his thumb and scoring 7 points, and it puts you guys in a really awkward spot. So before we can talk about trading guns for guns, let's go back a step here and talk about what's the number 1 goal. The number 1 goal for you guys and myself at the end of the day, right near the end of the season, is to have the 17 best scoring fantasy players in your squad. The only way that's possible is by making trades that's going to be adding value or cash, you know, making cash for you in one way or another. And then once they've made their money, you sell them and then you buy another cash cow. Once you've made money off them, you sell them. And eventually you'll have enough money stored in your remaining salary that you can start trading up players from those cashies into guns by effectively making good decisions in good moves. Here's the catch though, here's the restriction. You have a limited amount of trades available. You've only got 34 trades in a season, and that's not a lot. Like, let's think about it. 26 rounds, and of those 26 rounds, 3 is State of Origin, which means in a State of Origin round you can trade up to 3 players instead of just the standard 2 because, you know, effectively there's a lot more players out. In order to fulfill your 17, if you are to fulfill 17 players, you need to be making all 3 trades usually. And then in the other rounds, there's 2 trades you can usually have. As you can see in the bracket there, there's 2. So what would that mean? 23 rounds, if you were to trade the maximum amount of players you could each round, in 23 rounds, you could trade 2 players, so that's 46. And in 3 of those rounds, you could trade 3, so 9. So you can make a maximum of 55 trades if you weren't restricted to the amount of trades you can make. But it's really important that you're making the correct trades. And generally speaking, you think about it in layman's terms. If you're trading a gun to a gun, and then you're doing that all the time and effectively going sideways, you're never going to be able to make money. And that's the one thing that you want to be able to do. Because if, for example, let's look at the number 1 thing that everyone says, and rule number 1 is Cameron Smith. Cameron Smith went down $16,000. Now, he is going to be inside the top 17 players at the end of the year. He scored 47 points versus Cameron McInnes, who scored 70. Does that mean that Cameron McInnes is a better scorer in fantasy words than Smith, and therefore should I trade him because I think Smith's going to keep losing money? His break even, let's have a look at his break even. His break even is 80. He's probably not going to get 80, so he's going to lose more money. Does that mean I should trade him to Cameron McInnes, get the upside of cash, and then, wait for Cameron Smith to eventually lose money and then trade him back in? The answer is no. Once you've got someone who you believe is going to be in your 1 to 17, you need to hold on to them. Even if they're going to go up and down, you need to ride that out. Cameron Smith's score of 47 points is actually very low for him. It was a bit of a freak game. If you actually watched it, it was torrential rain throughout the entire game. It was very sloppy. The score was only 12 to 6, so it was the lowest scoring affair on the weekend. And that meant that Cameron Smith wasn't naturally kicking goals as much as he would, or possibly would like to. Around the ruck, he lost Bromwich, which is one of his hardest hitting forwards. So naturally, if he was offloading the ball into his second row, front row, they weren't naturally breaking the line, so he wasn't getting line break assist LBAs. So he's going to be in a bit of a tough position without the Tohu Harrises and without Kevin Proctor for quite some time, and some of his players are going to have to step up. But I honestly believe that he is someone that you need. And once you've made that trade, you have to stick with it. There's way more important trades to do after the first round than trading a gun for a gun, because you think about it that you want to make the most amount of money. Cashies, that's it. My number one trade will be Dylan Python this week, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you're not going to be able to make any money if you just want to go sideways all the way. And if you think about a strategy where you're playing very aggressive, and you'd be doing the complete opposite of going sideways, you'd just be making cash from lower tier players, cash them out, bringing them up. There was a lot of particular trades that people have asked me to look at, and a lot of people have said, why would you not bring this player in? Why would you bring that player in? Etc, etc. There are obviously players who you're going to miss. You're going to miss the boat on them, and that's very unfortunate. Jarryd Wallace is one of them. Jarryd Wallace I did not have. And that's one of the things I will say that I didn't have in my entire 25-man squad at the round one. I didn't have a single player between $300,000 to $400,000. I had zero, because I find them all mid-ranges, and they're not guns yet. They could become guns slightly, but I was better off going low-base cashies who have a much higher ceiling to hit. And if they were only to hit, that mark of around 300,000, then they've done a lot better than a player who went from 300,000 to 350, for example. And Jarryd Wallace is in that really sweet spot at the moment. He played at prop. A lot of people were expecting him to go to lock, but he actually played prop. And one of the things that he did this round is he scored 56 points, which is very high for someone at his value of 310 now. He's got dual position player. He's very liked by the fantasy community. Let's have a specific look at that. 35%. Now, I could trade him in. I could trade Musgrove. I've got 114. I had $114,000. This is my team as it was before any trade this week. I had $114,000. And the reason why I had that upside is because if anyone gets injured and I need to trade up, I'm not limited to always trading down. I can always go up. Now, I can bring Jarryd Wallace in. I can look at Sammy Burgess and say, look, Sammy Burgess, he scored 42 points. He went down 11k. That's not good. He's possibly not going to be scoring a lot of points. And one of the counters to that is that Robbie Farah is going to be playing hooker, which means his forwards and second rollers don't score that much. Generally speaking, at least when he was at the Tigers, if you look at the stats for those teams, all of a sudden, Aaron Woods scores dramatically well when he doesn't play. So is that effect going to hit the Rabbitohs as well? Potentially. But I've got bigger plans for people like Sam Burgess. I've got bigger plans for people like James Graham. And the one question you have to ask yourself is, why did you start with that player in the first place? There has to be a very good reason why you started with him. I thought Sammy Burgess was going to be solid. 42 was a below par score for him. I expect him to score dramatically higher, and I think he's going to be able to bounce back. The other thing also why he's such a good pickup is that, you know, he's a POM and therefore does not play State of Origin. He has good buy coverage. If you look at this, round 12, I've got 15 players out. Guess what? It's not Sammy Burgess or James Graham, so they're in my team for the long run. They've got a bigger plan in the side of that, and that's why I've picked those particular guns for the State of Origin cover, but the fact that they're usually a lot more consistent, and I'm expecting them to be a lot more consistent. Someone had asked specifically, like, Elijah Taylor underperformed, or I feel like he underperformed. Elijah Taylor, in my eyes, is a gun. When he played lock last year for 80 minutes, on average, he scores 55 points. Now, if we look up Elijah Taylor now, he was 399 and his average was about 42. So he's under average at the moment. I reckon he could be worth $500,000 in due time. The good thing about Elijah Taylor is he's an absolute tackling machine. You look at the last game that he actually played, forgetting last year's stats, you look at last week's game, he scored, let's have a look at the particular tackle count, because that's one of the most interesting stats. Elijah Taylor, 41 tackles. He only missed 2 tackles. He didn't do a lot of hit-ups, though. He did 1 tackle bust and gained 20 meters. So he obviously didn't do a lot of meters. He only played 61 minutes. The reason why he played 61 minutes is because he had that head knock with Sammy Burgess. And then, you know, he was bleeding out, so he had to, you know, get plucked off the field. He's an 80-minute player, and he's going to be an 80-minute player. You've got to look at it from the bigger picture. The 1 to 17 player rotation for the Tigers on the bench, number 14 is Jamal Idris, number 17 is Jack Littlejohn. Jamal Idris is a centre, so he's going to be coming on for Michael Cheekham like he did last week. Jack Littlejohn is a half / a hooker / a centre. He's a very good utility. He's more specialised towards the half roles. We know that when he played at Manly, he was an absolute freak. He was that good. I'm surprised he hasn't got a full-time role on a starting team. But I think Elijah Taylor, at the moment, is going to be underscoring because they don't have a consistent hooker. They got McIlrick at the moment, but they want Belin. Belin is coming off an injury. Once Belin slots in there, Elijah Taylor won't need to move from lock to hooker. And when Elijah Taylor goes from lock to hooker, his scores dramatically go down. So I'm actually looking to pick up Elijah Taylor around round 5, round 6, pending on a few other things, because he's just a tackling machine. He's just so solid in defense. So I can't consider not having him. His scores are much lower. His average starts off lower this year purely because he was a fill-in hooker and a lock. He just kept trading and it just didn't work for him. Once he secures that lock position for 80 minutes, and he is going to, because look at the bench, like I said, Idris, 14, Jack Littlejohn. That means they only have 2 forwards in 15 and 16. That means Woods is going to be, you know, subbed off, so is Sue, and probably one of the other side ones, like a Lawrence, one of the flanks. They're not going to be subbing off Elijah Taylor. I don't think you should be trading out Elijah Taylor, and I think you should be asking why you bought him in the first instance. The question specifically was, should I be looking at picking up Barnett for him? Should I be trading him in? Let's be honest, Barnett looks to be a fantasy gun. In 70 minutes, he scored, 70 points. That's a freak of an effort. And most of his points just came out from being at the lock position, being solid, playing really well. What is happening right now with this page? It's not loading completely. He's a gun. But like I said, I can't trade him in because no one is underperforming or injured himself. The only reason why I think you'd want to be trading in Barnett is if you've stuffed up your starting 25 and you need to make up for it somehow, and bringing in Barnett might be the way to go. Or Jesse Bromwich is injured and you need to replace an injured gun with someone because he's going to be out for 2 weeks, possibly 3. He's going to do excessively well. When he played last year and when he played 80 minutes, he was averaging about 55, but he had a bit of a rock start at the start of the year when he was being subbed on and subbed off. That's why he's at such a, I wouldn't say low value. $450,000 isn't low. I was really tossing up to actually to have him over Sammy Burgess. I just thought Sammy might be a little bit more consistent than him in the first place. So Barnett, by any means, is not a terrible pickup to have. But it just goes back to the fact of guns for guns. It just doesn't work for me. The other point that I really want to talk about is training rumours and hearing of things and having potential scares. Joshua McGuire played 70 minutes and scored 53 points. You couldn't ask anything more from him. He played in the centre, in the defence, in the lock position, did exceptionally well. And then at training, we hear that he's got a quad problem. He's got quad issues. His quads are tight. He didn't run in today's session. In fact, Benji Marshall had to come in. How many times have you heard that someone has trained the house down, or even in trials, was amazing in trials, or amazing in the Auckland Nines? You think of one player in particular, James Tamou. So many people wanted to pick up Tamou. Guess what he did? He didn't do the job. He ended up getting, what did he get? 32 points. He got less minutes. When a player changes teams and nothing else changes, like his minutes and stuff, a mid-ranger is going to be a mid-ranger. And look at him, he's 390. He's probably going to be there the entire time. Auckland Nines is a completely different game. And you kept hearing these things like training the house down. Absolutely amazing. The other player who probably people are going to think about in 2 or 3 weeks is Dave Taylor. Started to work at a pub. Started to get his life in order. Started to get a six-pack. Looks better than he ever has in the last 5 years. Trained the house down. Dave Taylor, very undervalued, 233,000. If Dave Taylor doesn't start, I don't want him. Because how is he any better than a Curtis Sirenen or, you know, a Frank Winterstein who's starting and definitely going to be playing those 60, 70, potentially 80 minutes? That's not likely. He could make a little bit of cash, but it's such a downtrade. We're going to have to wait a little bit more on him because Dave Taylor, he does some weird things. Like one game he ended up getting like 98 last year because he scored a hat-trick, or was it the year before? He scored a hat-trick. No one thought he could do it, but it was just a really weird game to watch, and he ended up doing it. One of the other things is I've been asked about Karen McInnes quite a bit. How did I know he was going to play 80 minutes last game, and even before then? The reality is sometimes you've got to take a bit of a punt with these guys. McInnes is a pod. He was at 2%. He's now almost at 3%, so a lot of people are starting to jump on him. But McInnes, despite the fact that Jai Field had been on the bench, named at 17, I kept seeing the stats of him last year. Every time he played 80 minutes, he played exceptionally well. Tackle bust, line breaks, would get the odd trial to miss tackles of less than 2%. When you're making 30 to 40 tackles a game and you miss tackles of less than 2%, which is, you know, less than 1 or 2 tackles a game across 2 seasons, that tells me that the guy's got a lot of stamina. My captain's choice, Jack de Belin, wasn't by fluke. I knew that he had great defensive stats looking over last year, and the fact that he also has an attacking prowess about him with offloads, line breaks, tackle bust, is always going to be a plus. You're better off putting the C on someone who's consistently and can hold his own defensively, so he's not draining points by missed tackles. Someone who's consistently doing well in that department, but also has the potential to also get attacking stats. Elijah Taylor, on the other hand, is just a tackling machine, whereas if you got Jack de Belin, tackling machine plus potential upside from the attacking stats, Jack de Belin probably will not play 80 minutes week in, week out like an Elijah Taylor, but that's the kind of risk that you take. And he had an absolute amazing try, didn't he? He had 4 tackle busts, broke the line, scored right under the post, reached out, put it down, and just did an amazing job. And that's kind of like the risk you got to take. When people pick Cam Smith, a lot of people got their point strain because, you know, Captain Cam Smith, rule number 1. And now we know rule number 1 isn't essentially the same for everyone. It really depends how you balance your team out. And it goes back to that round 1 video where I was saying I couldn't justify paying over $600,000 for a single player who could effectively have an injury or play not as great as he usually does round 1 and then suck out all the money when all these cash cows are out there. And by having that upside, it allowed me to go from Ryley straight to Kaysa Pritchard just before Ryley took the field, because I thought Seguiaro's news kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and if Ryley gets pulled out after round 1, what's the point? He might be able to make a lot more money than Kaysa Pritchard, but I'd rather play a guy who's going to hit his peak at the 5 or 6 games that he has to play in order to, you know, score the potential amount of points in order to get the dollar value that he can potentially reach, which is probably going to be around $300,000, if not more, for Kaysa Pritchard. One of the common questions I've seen so far is Kane Elgey. Should we be trading him to Ryley Jacks because we've got 3 halves instead of, having the standard 2 and then just having 2 cashies on the edge? Remember, if you're not playing them in your 17, I think you should always have cashies out. There's no point having someone over $200,000 on your bench unless they're going to be making money, like Matagi, who was only just gotten into the 219 mark after a 15k increase, and that's why you pick those cheapies up. But Kane Elgey into Ryley Jacks. Jacks had a really interesting game. He scored 41 points, but it's not as straightforward as you think. If you actually look at Ryley Jacks' point score for the Melbourne game, have a look at something and see if you can pick it up before I point it out. He is effectively, where is 41 points? There he is. Let's have a look. Tries, no. Try saves, no. Goals, field goals, tackle, try assist, line break assist. No. Guess what those first 5 or 6 stats are? They're all attacking stats. So is tackle bust. That's an attacking stat. The tackle bust should be one left over, I reckon, but it's not. But he's got 0 points for tackle bust. Where are all of his points? Tackles. How many missed tackles did he make? 0. He made 35 tackles in the halves. If you averaged the amount of tackles in a game a half would make from last year, 2016, you get a measly 14 tackles a game, and that's often accompanied by a missed tackle rate of at least 6%. So that 14, 13 becomes usually 12, and you're only scoring about 13, 12, 11 base points off defensive stats. He scored 35. It was a very weird game to watch. The torrential downpour, the tackling, it was a forwards game, and that's where it was really. His kick meters. He kicked 23 meters. Cooper Cronk kicked 422 meters. He'd done 2 kick diffusers, which is a random stat because, let's face it, getting a kick diffuser, usually wingers, fullbacks, a half, basically intercepting a kick was how we got those 2 diffusers. He made 35 tackles, 0 attacking stats. That is a very, very, very weird situation to have. Yes, he did gain 34 meters. 34 meters isn't a lot of meters to gain. Let's have a look at Cooper Cronk. Where is Cooper Cronk in all this? He only gained 7. So it wasn't a real ball running game for the halves. What I'm trying to say here is Kane Elgey is pretty much a like for like with Ryley Jacks. Ryley Jacks will not be able to make 35 tackles in the next game. He's not defending in the middle. All the attacking play from the Bulldogs won't be on the right flank, and therefore him defending on the left is going to mean that he's going to be defending every single set of 6. That's just not going to happen. He tackled, let's have a look at this. He only tackled 6 less than Josh Jackson, who was in the second row, and 5 less than James Graham, and Cameron Smith, who played 80 minutes right in the middle. That's ridiculous. So, should you be wasting a trade from Kane Elgey down to Ryley Jacks? Honestly, no. You should not be doing that, and that's why you shouldn't be doing it. He gained defensive stats for a position that's usually not defensive. That's very circumstantial. We're probably never going to see another game where you see a half make that amount that amount of tackles. If I go through every single game here in round 1, you're not going to see a half that has made the same amount of tackles that he's made in that particular round. So I would be very wary of that. The ideal situation is that you already have Elgey and you brought Ryley Jacks on the late mail. And that's going to be a new video. Late mail and sources of late mail, social media. I'm going to do it in round 3. I'll leave that for round 3. But getting late mail and bringing players like that in last minute is going to be the ticket in order to win, because every coach that effectively is going to get inside that top 1,000 does that. Remember, I had Ben Hampton until Ryley Jacks was officially named 1 hour before the game. I quickly flicked it over to Ryley Jacks because Ryley Jacks was starting in the halves, going to score well. Jai Field was 138, same value, starting from the bench as a half. Scored 2 points. His ownage rate was much higher than the 12.36 that we see for Ryley today. Let's actually just have a quick look at that while we're talking. That is, he lost 10k. That's 33% of people owned Jai Field. 33% of people strongly disadvantaged themselves by not looking into the late mail or the 1 hour before the game and getting the official team start, because he was named at number 21 and then got jumbled into the game just before or on game day. So obviously that is, you know, Hessler type tactics that was played by Melbourne's coach Bellamy. But that's not going to be the last time. It's not going to be the first time. They're probably protecting Ryley Jacks from getting a lot of media attention before the game, because, you know, a rookie making a game would get a lot of attention, put a lot of pressure on him. So he probably didn't walk in there with the same amount of weight in his shoulders as someone who was named from the get-go to be starting. So I think those two are very alike. Trading down is not going to be a thing here. He scored 26 points for Kane Elgey. That's not a great result. Let's face it. The Titans played woeful against the Roosters. Who did they have this weekend? Mark my words, Kane Elgey is going to get 35 at least. They're playing Newcastle. Don't trade out Elgey. It's not time yet. His break-even is 18. He's definitely going to be getting that. There's going to be some upside cash. You shouldn't be trading that. Let's have a talk about someone else in the halves, though. Bryce Cartwright, or it could be one of your second rows, depending how you're breaking down your team. All over the media. His issues with his ex-girlfriend, I think it was Brittany Hurrah, and now his issues with his side chick, is that what you want to call them? He was basically seeing someone not as often, wasn't official, or potentially was official to close family and friends. Had to pay for an abortion. A lot of drama. Currently has a new girlfriend. Seems to be getting his life on track. This is an old mistake that's caught up with him. It's been blown up inside the media. Round 1. Channel 9 reckons it's going to overshadow the entire NRL season, which is completely ridiculous. Does that mean you should be worried about Bryce Cartwright scoring in fantasy points? He's named in the team. He's going to be playing. No. Don't buy into the bullshit. We're not here as Greenpeace mission makers. We're here purely to win fantasy. Keep your personal opinions outside of your team if you want to do well. Was it the right thing to do? Probably not. It was probably handled really poorly. You know, the lack of responsibility. But your responsibility as a fantasy coach is to score the most amount of points you potentially can. And the reality is, the Dragons rode them like horses. They kept breaking through the line. He made 43 tackles. He made 7 missed tackles. 43 tackles, missed 7. So effectively he made 50 tackles and 7 of those were misses. That's a lot of tackles for a single player. And yes, he is a bit of a turnstile because everyone went through him left, right, and centre. And yes, he did open up Terry Murray Martin defensively as well, and they just kept going through them all day. But his attacking stats are going to be right up there. Yes, he only made 1 tackle bust. Yes, he only made 2 offloads. He made 75 meters. But he's going to be able to make those points back, I strongly believe. I hope this is going to, not sink into him too much. I genuinely feel like, yes, it's going to affect his game to some degree, but I think he's going to still be good for the 50 points. I'm not going to be trading him out just yet. I don't think it's time. I think I'm going to have to ride this out. Trades that are potentials are, DCE, Luke Keary, who's starting for the Roosters, who looked amazing. Is he going to be able to do that again? We'll have to wait and see. But I'm holding on to Bryce Cartwright for now. Other questions around the centre positions. Talakai looked absolutely amazing. Sione Matautia played in the second row for the first 50 minutes, and then after Python pulled his ACL at the 50th minute, Sione Matautia ended up going back to the centre role and played the full 80 minutes, the rest of the 30 minutes there. Still scored 46 points. What was weird to me was that I was reading on a lot of people's opinions is that even if he played 80 minutes, people were expecting him to score 30 to 35 points. That doesn't make any sense. From my first video, we'd already discussed, when he plays in the second row for 80 minutes, he scores 45 on his lower tier, and he can generally score from anywhere from 50 to 55 to 60. He's just a tackling machine. He's just the guy that gets up and keeps going. He hasn't been named in the centres. In fact, that's going to be another story later down the track because Brendan Elliott's been pushed back to fullback, so he goes back into the second row. I actually think Sione Matautia is going to be playing 80 minutes. The scary thing is, if any of the back rowers, if any of the back line, not the back rowers, back line gets injured, he's most likely going to go to that centre spot and be screwed there. But I think they've got a lot of depth at the centre and fullback position. Should any of them get injured the following game, they'd be easily replaced. Like, he's got so many brothers that can still play. Pat Matautia, Chanel Matautia, there's that Joe Waddell that everyone's been talking about that is apparently a fantasy gun. That's a cheapie, a cashier, but hasn't played just yet. I think Sione Matautia is the go-to guy, and I can't trade him out. Jamal Idris, wow. 1 hour before the game, named back on the bench, scoring 18 points, made quite a few errors. In fact, in his first touch, he just ran 1 meter and dropped the ball. It was mind-boggling to some degree. I'm holding on to him. I don't want to trade him because in 4 to 5 rounds, when he starts playing those 80 minutes, or presumably 80 minutes, he's going to start to get those scores again. And I still think he's worth 30 points, even if he only plays 60 minutes. When he hits that 20-minute mark and he comes on for Michael Cheekham, expect him to make some tackle bust, expect him to get the first game jitters out of the system, which I think that was. Remember, his halves, Moses and Brooks, loves to pass the ball out quite significantly, and they're not necessarily running halfbacks. They like to pass the ball out to Tedesco, Jamal Idris. Jamal Idris could feed off a lot of Tedesco, scoring him a try. He'd get a lot of tries. I would be holding on to Jamal Idris indefinitely. Brian Kelly was another one. 29 points. He did like an 18-point play in the 10th minute of the game against the Eels. He broke through the line, got a try and also line break, and he did a tackle bust in there. One of the weird things about Brian Kelly, and it was a bit abnormal for Manly, is that they did 4 to 5 dropouts in a row, which meant they were defending on their line for the first 20 minutes of the second half. In fact, possession was about 40 to 35% Manly. Where do wingers and centers score all their points? When they're attacking. They rarely get many tackle defense points up. So Brian Kelly's probably good for 29 points each week. He's probably better for a little bit more than that once the team starts to calm down, gets the errors out of the way, gets the mistakes, gets the knockdowns out of the way, because he's going to be getting a lot more ball. I wouldn't be making any trades in the center position just yet for myself. A player that I would love to have. Oh my god, Moga. Tautau Moga. He was absolutely amazing. Is that an alarm? Is that going to be on all day? Oh no. Okay, that's good. Tautau Moga was absolutely amazing. Days of old. He's had 3 knee reconstructions in the last 4 years. But guess what? He's back. He's better than ever. He's playing in a good side. And he was a tackle-busting machine. Strength alone and size, he was breaking up people left, right, and center. He's kind of like a Conrad Hurrell, but with a different kind of shape and size to him. A lot more taller, probably more leaner as well. And he just was a tackle-busting machine. He looked absolutely amazing. Tautau Moga is actually one of my favorite players that doesn't actually really play that much. I didn't bring him in the first time because David Mead was potentially going to take that center spot. And Tautau Moga has had injury scares in the last, couple of years. The other thing is that from the training session is he had a heart murmur, and it was posted that it's not that bad. He sat out of training, a heart scare. It's not. I would do anything to have him in my side, but all these guys are going to be making cash. Talakai, Idris will eventually make cash. Kelly will eventually make cash. Sione Matautia is just a solid center. I think Moga is a must-have. I think Moga is a must-have if you have him, and if you have made a mistake with any of your centers and you need to pull someone in, do it. I can't justify pulling him in for Sione Matautia because I need Sione Matautia in my top 17 players playing. I don't believe in having any of your centers or fullbacks reserved at all, so there's no point. And I can't necessarily justify bumping him up into the second row because all these guys are making cash. Don't do that. Like, don't bump players out unless they're going to be making slow cash. These guys should start to make much higher cash very fast. Jamal Idris might be a little bit slower, but he'll get there. He'll be fine. Going into my back row, Jarryd Hayne. Everyone's like, this guy's a media joke. He's in the media spotlight again. Get him out of your teams. He was lazy. He didn't care about it. That is exactly what I wanted to hear, because the number one thing that always fires up Jarryd Hayne or Jane is the fact that he plays to his haters' discretion. When he's getting called out by Paul Kent on, NRL 360, that's great for us. That's great for anyone that holds him. I wouldn't trade him out. 32 points wasn't a great score, but his break even is only 14. He's definitely going to be making cash. Don't trade him out. Don't be that guy that trades out a potential guy who's going to be making 30, 40, 50 grand in the next couple of weeks. I think I'm definitely going to be having him in my 17 again. He is a guy that's just going to get the job done. I think he's going to actually pull off a lot out of his hat. He got that one first game out of the way for the season. Yes, he might be switched to winger when he's defending, whatever. That doesn't matter too much. I just think that this is going to fire him up. I think every time he gets in the media, he gets this little chip under his shoulder, which, isn't so noticeable, but I expect him to come out and absolutely have a ripper of a game. Sully I brought in on late mail. Again, he was named 21. He came in last second. Boom, I pulled him in. Made some good cash. And Cartwright just did a good job all around. 36 points. He wasn't that fast on the wing. In fact, Jonathan Thurston ran him down. I was a little bit surprised by that. But Python. Who should I be trading for Python? What do I do? One of the questions I saw is, do I trade Python? He's not going to lose any money, because if he doesn't play, he doesn't lose money. That's one way of thinking. But if he doesn't play, he's not making you cash as a cashie. When there are other cashies available, make the trade. He is out all season. You want dead weight to sit on your bench all year when you've got 2 trades to make? Now, who am I going to be trading to? That's the other question. I really liked Uate. Uate looked very hot on the wing for Parramatta. For Manly when they were playing against Parramatta. He looked very hot-tempered. He looked very clean. He looked very, fired up. He looked ready to play. He looked like he wanted the ball. He looked like he wanted to get the wheels in motion. He looked like he wanted to put the foot down. And he looked like a tackle-busting machine when he wanted to get involved. He came into the centres quite a few times, like in the centre of the field, and took a few runs to, relieve some of the second and front rowers. But again, possession went against him. Possession and the fact that Manly didn't have a lot of it, like Brian Kelly, so he actually underscored. He scored 31, but I think, given the fact that possession should even itself out, I expect him to do the same, if not better, next game. I think we've got Uate of old back, which is good news if you're holding on to him. The other way to go is, there's 2 people who have been named. Braden Burns, named on the wing for South Sydney. Who is this guy? He is the fullback for the feeder team, and just this week he scored 62 fantasy points for the feeder team. That was on the back of 2 tries, so effectively 16 points, deduct those. You're left with about 40 to 50 points, and that is solid. Yeah, the other thing you got to remember is scoring fantasy points inside the feeder league isn't anywhere near playing in the Premiership League. The defense is way much better. You're not going to be able to, run amok and, do whatever you want. It's either him or Uate, or there's another person, Dylan Edwards, who's going to be playing on the wing for Penrith. I'm writing him off immediately. Don't put him in your team. Let me explain first. Dylan Edwards is coming in for the injured Peter Hiku. DWZ has been named in the top 21. He could come in this week. He could come in next week. He could come in the week after. You also got to remember DWZ has a brother, Malachi. He could also come in and replace Dylan Edwards. Dylan Edwards is the fullback for the feeder team and does quite well, but not at the same extent that Burns does. So I could go $139,000 for Dylan Phythian to Uate, who's going to be scoring quite a few points for us, I believe. And I think he's valued possibly $100,000. Or I could go to Burns, which is the trade I'm going to make. And the reason why I'm making this trade is 138. He is basement value. One of the things I mentioned in my last video is why I picked Talakai to be playing in the centres in the starting role from the Rabbitohs in my particular fantasy team is because centres and wingers in the South Sydney Rabbitohs teams always score well. Hymel Hunt might not have scored well, but Bryce Goodwin scored like 62 points. Talakai, 44 points. Who else was there? There was someone else there. GI didn't score well because he was injured. That doesn't count for anything. He's going to be coming in the wing, and Aaron Gray, who would potentially push him out of the squad, is still, 7, round 8, round 9. So in 4 to 5 rounds, if he scores the way he should be scoring, he's going to be able to effectively get wherever his benchmark is of his top value, and that's when you're going to sell him. So Braden Burns is my pick based upon his result in the feeder team, 62 points. You can't look beyond that. He's effective. He does quite a few tackle busts. Yes, he's going to be playing in a more higher league, but the fact is he's playing for South Sydney. They love to spread the ball. I think he's going to do well, and that's why I've gone with him over anyone else. Again, if you had Cartwright in the centres and you could pull a DPP out, like Cartwright down to fullback to replace Python, that would be my move, because I'd want Moga. I want Moga really, really badly. But I can't justify grabbing Moga inside the replacement. And that's the way you got to think about this at the end of the day, guys, is, am I making good trades? Go back to why you have them in your team in the first place, and then work from there. Don't go off the fact they undervalued for one play. It wasn't a great result. Let's completely, change the way we're going. 42 points isn't that bad from Burgess. 51 isn't that bad from Graham. Yes, it's a little bit under expectation, but you got to take the good with the bad. And the other thing is Jesse Bromwich is out for 2 rounds, at least. I'd be trading him. There's 2 rounds of not having a gun. If you built your team like my team, guns and cashies, you don't have the money to replace Jesse Bromwich with someone and have him on the bench and replace him and substitute him off for someone and score well. Unless you've got some freak of a player that's, been able to kind of prove themselves. Maybe like a Jarryd Wallace, maybe like a Matagi, but I just think you need to be able to have the gun in there at the moment for an injury. 2 weeks minimum. That could be 3 weeks. It could be 4. He could come back and his hand might not be the same. He might not have the same confidence running into the tackles. Trade him out. If you really want to bring him in, wait for about 4 to 5, 6 weeks after he comes back, because he's going to lose money. Let's have a look specifically at him. Jesse Bromwich, here we go. 35k he lost. His break-even is 80. So, if he scores 40 or 50 points on his return, he loses another 30 to 40k. So I'd definitely be looking at, pulling the plug on him. But all else is pretty well with my team. This is my team from top to bottom. They're all scoring really well. They're all making money, bar the 3 that I named. And this is going to be my team in case there's any last-minute changes. I might pull the reserve card off Kaysa Pritchard and put it on Matagi. I'm going to leave it on Frankenstein and Sione. Their club, Manly, is in serious trouble. Lloyd Perrott is injured. He was 17th man. Afanua Blake is also suspended, and so is Martin Tapau. He's suspended as well. So that means Curtis Sione and Frank Winterstein, are most likely going to be playing 80 minutes, if not 60 minimum. They're still going to be able to make cash. Definitely have them in your squad. I'm going to be starting with that. I don't like to put the reserve on any of my backline. That includes halves, because it's just not worth it. Yes, Jax did outscore Winterstein, but it's just starting base stats in defense for tackles is much greater than anything else. I could do a last-minute switch from Frankenstein to Kaysa Pritchard, but Kaysa Pritchard is a lot more nimble. He misses quite a few tackles, lost quite a few points defensively. It kind of evened it way out by the way he was defending. He didn't really run the ball that much, so he wasn't hogging attacking stacks, which is good for the Parramatta Eels because it's good to spread the ball out. Matagi, I'm definitely going to be reserving. Mate, he was running at the strongest player in Martin Tapau and kept getting up and running the ball What do you think is going to happen when he's playing? Who's he playing this week? He's playing the Dragons. I expect him to be able to get a lot more tackle busts against the Dragons than he did Manly, and having Tapau marked on him every single time he ran at the line. So that's going to be my pick for my 4 reserves. My team stays the same. I make one trade. I make a trade purely into a cash. He's starting at 138. His ceiling price is going to be much greater than Uate's. Uate like 180, could possibly get 100. Burns could possibly make 150, etc. And that also means that I leave a lot more money in my kitty. I still have $115,000. That's considerably quite a lot of money not to be playing, but I'm playing for points and I'm playing for cash. No mid-ranges. Forget the mid-ranges, guys. You don't want mid-ranges. You want guys that are going to be making you cash. Undervalued guns, cashies, or very significantly undervalued mid-ranges who are just going to get up there, like a Curtis Sione, who's probably going to go up in $100,000 value. One thing I want to finish on, let's have a look at the rankings. We'll do this every week. Let's have a look at the number one team every week and see if it's possible to catch up to them and why we should be able to catch up to them. Will there be a consideration? Where are their weaknesses? What would we do if we're in their team? Now, they got a little bit lucky. Bunty Affo is going to be starting again. If Bodine Thompson came in the side, there was a potential he was going to get knocked back to the bench, which means he probably wouldn't have scored the 49 points. There was another injury in his team. So he's been pretty lucky to start yet again. So all the people that owned him, 3.66%, including the leader, Mundine Forever, you know, it's kind of paid off. It's a bit of a funny way of looking at how it paid off, but it has. Jarryd Wallace, you know, we spoke about that before. Did we speak about that before? You know, I just can't see him playing 70 minutes every game, and it was based on an injury. I can't see a prop doing that. He used to play 36 minutes last season on an average. Do I expect him to exceed that greatly? That's a really big ask to be able to do that from one season to the next. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I do, in fact, believe he's going to be making quite a bit of cash. I mean, his break-even's 14. He's bound for another... Well, according to this, he's bound for another 12k in round 2 and 3 if he scores 29 and 26. But he's going to be doing a lot better than that, in my opinion. So he's probably good for another 40k, possibly 50. Finucane was another one. Probably got a lot more time on the field than he should have, given the fact that Bromwich went out and there was a bit of funny things happening with that squad. He also reserved Kane Elgey. That's a weakness, in my opinion, having a half in there. He picked Corey Norman. Great pick. Sean Johnson played significantly well. He was a little bit worrying at the start of the game because he didn't do much. And then all of a sudden, Sean Johnson pulls out bags of points in the dozen. He pulled out one player that got him 12 points and did another one that got him another 14. His centers are really strong. Moga, Talakai, Idris and Kelly. It's very similar to mine, except that I've got Mataudia over Moga. So, very like for like, except he's gone for the much cheaper option. And his fullbacks are exactly the same. Sully, Hayne, and Tuivasa Sheck. Python, it will be interesting to see what this guy does with his Python trade and his Nick Kotrick. So his back line, his centers and wing fullback, is effectively the same as mine, bar the Moga trade that he's got. So he's gone for a full cashy squad. Good on him for doing that, because that means it is definitely going to be paying out. And because he was able to do that, he probably paid a lot more up this front row and in securing those definite points. But he's got a weakness in Isaiah Papali, who I don't believe... Did he play? Yeah, he did play. He got 16 points. I don't think he's going to be making that many points for him or much cash. So that might be a little bit of a weakness. Because he's gone for these Bunty Affos and Jarryd Wallaces, he hasn't been able to get Sione, Winterstein, Matagi, and Musgrove. He's gone full out. He's gone 2 mid-ranges versus having, 4 cashies. So, we're going to be balancing that up a little bit. We'll see if we're going to be able to catch him. More importantly, will we be able to catch him? His deficit to us is 35 points. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciated all the support. If you're liking what we're doing so far, if you're liking the series, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. I really appreciate that. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up. Let me know your questions. Ask me any question you want. I'll probably feature it on my next episode. That way we can kind of have a bit of a trend where you guys ask questions pre and post round 2. That way we can kind of shuffle what the important things are to tackle, and I'll try to include them in my show. This has been great. This has been Spot the Aussie, your number 22 rank fantasy coach out of there, hopefully pushing for a much higher score. We will check it out very shortly, and I'll see you guys soon.